Welcome to the Wisdom of Show. I'm your host, Simon Bowen, and every week I'm speaking to the world's greatest leaders, thinkers, and entrepreneurs about complex issues and impactful leadership. Join us in the Renaissance of Wisdom. Well, welcome to the Wisdom of, the show where we rise above the tips, tricks, and hacks to uncover timeless wisdom for an increasingly complex world. And today I'm joined by Mike Desjardins, CEO of VUCA. He's a leadership expert who spent more than 2 decades helping leaders transform not just their businesses, but their people. Mike reminds us that as go the leaders, so goes the world. A profound comment that he made as we got into the conversation. And in the conversation, he challenges what we think leadership really is, revealing why emotional intelligence is not a soft skill, but indeed a concrete, foundational skill for every result that truly matters in business. I'm so looking forward to this, and so welcome, Mike.
I thank you, first of all, for having me, Simon. And yeah, I agree. I mean, the reality is, as goes leaders, so goes the world. I mean, a
So,
lot of people think about leadership in the business context where they think, oh, leaders are in charge of companies, but like there's politicians, there's leaders all over the planet. And as go the leaders, so does humanity in the world go that same direction.
wow. So, I mean, that is just interesting straight out of the gate. So let's think about this for a moment. I mean, I
Yeah.
could slip into, okay, how do we develop better leaders and everything else?
Yeah.
But what is the most controversial thing, or what are some of the most controversial or misguided things that we might have all been holding on to that you've heard over the years doing this about leadership?
I think there's a couple of them. I think one of them is that people are born leaders, like that somehow there's some genetic component to this that allows somebody to be in leadership. And I think that with the right circumstances and the right prompting and motivation, anybody can become a leader or be in a leadership role. And there's many roles in our lives, whether we're parents or we're coaching a kids soccer team, or we are, we have friends or family, or we're in a business context. Like there are all these different ways that we can play a leadership role. I think the second thing that gets confused is that you need to be this outgoing, confident,
Yeah.
gregarious person, and that's like our model of leadership, right? That might be the one you would probably see in most movies or TV shows. And I think what that does is it undervalues introverts greatly.
Mm.
And introverts are people that typically are a bit quieter. They tend to be more contemplative in that they'll be thinking in a conversation as opposed to talking in a conversation. They'll be listening, thinking, and maybe coming back with questions before they determine a course of action. And in fact, Susan Cain wrote a wonderful book called Quiet. And it's a book that helps introverts understand that they can be very powerful and strong leaders. They just have to know how to operate in a world where we think extroverts should be the people leading us.
Mm. It's interesting. I mean, as you know, I spend, in full disclosure, you and I know each other, and
Yeah.
as you know, I spend a lot of my time in the sales enablement and sales strategy space, and we have this same view that the best salespeople have the gift of the gab, and they're very out there, and they can talk to anyone
Yeah.
and work a room and network and everything else. But by the time you get to the sales conversation, um, less extroverted people. I don't love the term introversion because it's got this judgment attached to it now.
For
But
sure.
but people who are less extroverted are often the best salespeople for all of the
Yes.
reasons that you said. Because sales is leadership; it's
Right.
leading people through a decision and then letting them make that decision. So, we've got these kind of views around leadership. I want
Yeah.
to go in a little direction for a moment.
For sure.
I'm going to ask you to give me your different definitional difference between leadership versus management, because I think a lot of the time that we're talking about leadership, we're actually talking about management. And if for me, we manage things and we lead people. But I'd
Yes.
love to get your kind of clarification around leadership versus management. And then I want to go down a path with that. I have a reason for that question.
Yeah, I think, it starts at that moment where somebody has an expertise in a particular area. And why they're valued in the organization is they know a lot about a thing. Maybe it's
Mm,
marketing or it's finance, it could be IT, it doesn't matter. They know sales, they know a lot about that one thing. And so the organization says, well, we're going to make you a leader of
mm,
people. Now, what got me there was this expertise. I'm really good at, say, it's sales. I'm really good at sales. I've got great numbers. So now they're going to put me in charge of a sales team. The question is, am I being measured against my ability personally to produce sales anymore? The
yeah.
answer for most is no, right? Like what I'm actually going to be judged by is how good I can make the salespeople to report up to me. So now what matters is not how good I am, it's how good I can make other people. Can I
Mm,
develop the people around me to be as strong as I was in my discipline? If I continue to measure myself by my personal output, I'm going to suck as a leader because the people around me are not going to be able to flourish and grow with my help. They're going to do whatever they do, right? They're going to try to figure it out themselves. So that first time that somebody becomes a leader, it's this phrase of like, what got you here won't get you there. You all of a sudden have to turn around and think, how do I support the development and growth of the people that report to me so they can be as good as I was?
yeah.
And that's the only way that I'm going to be successful, even though the reason I got promoted was because of how good I personally was. But that
Yeah.
doesn't matter anymore. It's only how good I can make other people. That's the first time. And that's the hardest point for leadership because the first time that that expectation has ever been placed on a person.
Yeah, it's interesting. Um, you know, we manage the disciplines, but we lead the people, and they have very different
Yeah,
skill sets. I don't know if this is true
absolutely.
for, yeah, I don't know if this is true for all sports, but the sports that I have a keen interest in, team sports, the best coaches were seldom the superstar players. And
Mhm.
there's a disproportionate number of them in our Australian rules football game that were the middle of the road defenders. And that's probably because they're used to seeing the whole field and marshalling it and thinking about it, and they become great coaches. But I remember seeing an interview with Paul McCartney, and he said, we were a good band until Ringo Starr sat down behind us in Liverpool for a gig one night. And he said, I looked at John, and John looked at George, and George looked at me. And he said, for the first time, we became the Beatles because Ringo, who was not the superstar out front, but he was driving the band, and so we often look at the people out front who are the superstars and go, they'd be great leaders. It's like taking a brilliant engineer who knows everything about engineering and say, now lead people. And they'll try and
Mhm.
lead them like a spreadsheet. It won't work. It's a completely different skill set. So let's lean in on leadership specifically. I just wanted that distinction for everybody. We're not talking about
Yeah.
management, we're talking about leadership. And you talk about emotionally intelligent and driven with a core motivation to make a difference, right?
Yeah.
So we have had management by objectives and, a lot of, the results driven leader as opposed to the emotionally driven leader. I'd love to explore those parallels. We still have to produce results, right? But
Yeah.
emotionally driven, emotionally intelligent and driven with a motivation to, make a difference in the lives of other people.
Mhm.
Draw that distinction for me between emotionally intelligent and then results driven.
Yeah, I think they need to coexist. I mean, the reality is that every email you write, every phone call you're in on, every text message you send, every meeting you're in is with other people. Like
Mm,
it's not with machinery. So you can manage a process, you can manage, assets, right? Whether they're digital or physical. You can manage maintenance, for instance, if you're in an industrialized setting. But really you need to lead people. And leading people, if you're with people all the time, the number one skill you need to have is a solid grounding in emotional intelligence. The way I would
mm,
describe it to you is imagine you were building a building, right? And your decisions are, I'm going to build it on sand. So that would be a weak emotional intelligence, right? I'm going to build it on sand and I'm going to start building the building up. The higher the building goes, the more leadership skills you apply to it. It's going to sway and rock. And if there's an earthquake or some business thing that happens that shakes your organization, the building's going to be moving all over the place because your foundation is weak. It's built on sand. Well, imagine instead that you developed your emotional intelligence and that was like concrete foundation with like bedrock and rebar. And like this building is not going anywhere because it is
Mm.
grounded. And then you built leadership skills above that. You learned how to have a difficult conversation. You learned how to give feedback. You learned how to be a good communicator. You learned how to be a good strategic thinker. You learned how to build trust. So as you build those skills above that, if anything happens in the organization that pushes against those your ability to be a leader, you're grounded in concrete. And
Mm.
that's what emotional intelligence is.
Yeah. So, I remember when was it Coleman, the book first came out around emotional intelligence. That was the first time and that was a long time ago. That was the
Yeah,
first time.
the first one, I mean, I would say that working with the David Goleman book, which came out in
Yeah.
1998, working with emotional intelligence, was the first time that somebody said emotional intelligence is a critical factor in the success of a leader. Prior to that, emotional intelligence was something that was spoken about in education relative to children and their
Right.
growth and maturity, and it was spoken about in a counseling setting, but it was not spoken about relative to work until really 1998. That was the pivotal piece of literature that was written on emotional
So,
intelligence in the office.
it's a bit like you know, uh, Chat GPT entered
Yeah,
the public domain in November
yeah,
2022, and everyone feels like that's when AI started, but it had a
yeah,
long tail before that, right? And so this 1998, gee, I didn't
yeah.
realize it was that long ago, right? But I don't feel like the concept of emotional intelligence in leadership has managed to claim that foundational bedrock status that you talk about.
Yeah.
What what is it that's holding us back as a
Yeah.
society to really actually recognizing that that's what we should be demanding from our leaders? Actually, where is the what's the barrier?
I mean, I would say that it took 12 years before I first experienced it not being like it was 12 years in 2010 before a client said to us, you can tell people you're doing this. Like you can tell them about emotional intelligence and you can tell them that's actually what you're building in them
Wow.
as you grow their leadership skills. Prior to that, the HR teams would allow us to do it, but we weren't allowed to say the words. Like they're like, that's people are not going to like that.
Wow.
So I would say that the issue, Simon, was that people think of it as a soft skill.
Yeah.
I'm talking about it as concrete foundation. That sounds pretty hard to me,
Yeah.
right? But they would think about it as soft skill, and it's kind of like, well, it's a nice thing to have. But if you imagine that it affected every single conversation that you were in
Yeah.
as a leader, that you could not escape your emotional intelligence, then you'd start to think, well, okay, if I could grow it, then I need to be able to learn how to grow it in a very practical way. So first of all, I need to understand like what are the five different areas of emotional intelligence. Then I need to figure out, well, how could I, if it's something I can grow, like unlike our intelligence, it's pretty much fixed. Blame your parents, right? But your emotional intelligence is something you can grow over time. Well, how do I practically grow this in the way that I could learn, a format for how to negotiate or, a
Yeah.
format for how to have a great sales conversation?
Yeah. I don't know that the term soft and hard skills has actually served us that well.
It's
To,
gotten in
to
the way.
it has gotten in the way a lot.
Yeah, it has.
Whereas if you'd said to those HR teams, it might
Yeah.
be considered a soft skill, but is it a core skill?
Yes.
They would have said,
That's a
yeah,
good word.
yeah, it's a core skill. So
It
shouldn't we
is.
teach it then?
Well, I would say I would even, it's a core skill. I would maybe even use the word foundational.
Yeah,
Specifically, I use the concrete
yeah,
foundation of a building because I do think that I know at this stage that it is foundational to the success of a leader. And the reason I know that is that if we get called by an organization, so we've got clients all around North America. If I get a call from a chief people officer and they say they are having a struggle with a director, a VP, or an executive vice president, and they're wondering if they can get our support to assess that individual, figure out why they aren't collaborating well, and why they're struggling at the very senior level of the organization, every single time it's emotional intelligence.
mm, mm,
Not 99 out of 100 every time. It's an issue with their emotional intelligence. And the reason they got away with it, they're very strong as a subject matter expert and they're very smart. And so they've been promoted all the way up until they have to collaborate with a very smart group of people who are highly emotionally intelligent and they won't put up with their crap.
Interesting. So it's the skill, actually.
Yeah, it is. And it becomes more important the higher you go up in an
Right.
organization. So the earlier you learn it, if you could learn it as a child, which, we've taught our daughter it from a very early age. There's a wonderful book that I'll have to think of it. We'll put it in the show notes. That's all about developing emotional intelligence in children. If you
Yes.
can develop it at the very early stage, that is going to make a massive difference in how they're going to show up as a leader in the future. If
Yes.
you have to start with somebody who's in their mid 40s, who
Yeah.
has not been developed in that area, oh man, you need their ego to have a slight fracture in it. A little light needs to get through that they could understand that this is the thing holding them back from further success in their career.
Yeah. There's so many directions I could go in right now, and I think any notes I've got are kind of almost pointless. But we'll come back to
Yeah.
emotional intelligence and unpack what that
Yes.
is in a little while.
Yeah. Let's do that. Yeah.
But before I do that, you've worked across the public sector. You work with
Yep.
large public companies. You work with
Yep.
founder-led entrepreneurial
Absolutely.
business. They all have different dynamics within them, and yet you're trying to bring this recognition of emotionally intelligent leadership to all of them. What have you learned from an execution point of view, or an approach point of view, that allows you to get stakeholders engaged across almost any sector that you want to walk into, where you might be putting something in front of them that needs a crack in the ego to let the light through and doesn't sound woo woo, new age, all that sort of
Yeah.
thing. You're not taking we're going to double your sales to them. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's this thing across very different sectors. What have you discovered in terms of some of the approaches that have really worked for you as you tackle people with change?
The reality is that irrespective of industry, public, private sector, founder-led entrepreneurial businesses, wherever those leaders are, it doesn't matter what the business is. They'll say, "Oh, our industry is very unique." But when you've heard someone describe to you that they're like, I've been doing this 25 years, right? So when I've heard the thousandth person say to me that their business and industry was very unique, you start to think, well, if you're all unique, maybe you're all not unique. And the
Mm,
reality is with leadership, it doesn't really matter what the industry space is, what the country is. Leadership is leadership. And I think the important thing is, especially with emotional intelligence, you have to teach it to people in a practical way that they can apply it in their day-to-day role in their business or in their whatever their career is. You have to be able to apply it right away,
yeah,
in a way where they say, "I did this, and this is better than the way I used to do it."
yeah. So, what is that saying? The fastest way to learn something is to go and teach it to somebody else within 24 hours,
Yes.
basically.
Yeah.
So, anytime you're acquiring new knowledge, be thinking about, how am I going to teach this in the next 24 hours to somebody?
Yeah.
And it's fascinating when you do that. It sticks. It's in your head forever.
It does, but if you learn, the trick though is if you learn as a theory,
Yeah,
then you're just sharing a theory.
yeah,
So anybody could have read that book. What we want to do is we want leaders who can actually explain practically how they can do that with somebody else that they need to be in conversation with. And
yeah,
so it's almost like we have this test, we call it the video test. You need to be able to turn the sound off and just watch the video. And without the sound on, if I can watch somebody in a conversation, I can watch their body language, I can watch how the person's reacting to them. And I'm like, okay, whatever they're doing, it's working. If I turn the sound on and all they're doing is talking about theory, well, that doesn't help anybody. We need to practically be able to witness that they can do these things. And emotional intelligence, thankfully, is actually a bunch of practical skill sets. We can talk about them too.
yeah. Well, we'll come to that. You talk about this approach to leadership, that this
Yep.
emotional intelligence is about driving return on investment in
Yeah.
every client interaction, and
Yep.
the practical application for business, at least, is the client has an interaction they're happy to pay some money for, and then the team can deliver that in a way that is profitable, right? In very simplistic terms. So let's talk about the return on investment
For sure.
that comes from emotionally intelligent leadership.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is this: people want to work with people they like, trust, and respect,
Yeah.
like full stop. The more authentic you are in the world, the more you show up as your true self, the more that you make your intentions clear, the easier it will be for you to build relationships. And if the people you're trying to work with, say you're in sales or you're working with a company that you've sold something to, it doesn't matter what your role is in the company. If they think of you as a partner instead of thinking you as a vendor,
Yeah.
that's a step in the right direction. And where emotional intelligence kicks in is my ability to know myself. So to be clear on where I am right now, that's self-awareness, right? I need to know that in a conversation. So if I'm tired today, if I'm frustrated right now, and I don't explain to you why I'm frustrated, but you sense that I'm frustrated, there's a good chance you'll think I'm frustrated with you or angry or some emotion.
Mm.
But if I was able to say, like, one, I feel frustrated right now, and I know going into my conversation with Simon is probably not helpful for me to bring that conversation into that with him. So that's awareness first. But second, it's self regulation. So I have the ability to regulate my emotions as is appropriate for the situation. Now, you and I are friends. So I would, if I was really frustrated coming into conversation, I would say, Simon, today sucked. Today was really hard. I've been in 8 meetings. Everything's gone sideways. I feel really frustrated. And you would say, okay, thanks for telling me what's going on with you. Then you know if I'm short or whatever, you get it, right? So that's the
Yeah.
second tenet is self-regulation. I also need to be able to know, um, can I empathize with what's going on with you? Am I curious enough to know what's happening in your world? Now, I don't have to agree with the things you say, but I need to be curious enough so that I deeply understand what's happening for you and
Yeah.
what your point of view is. So that's another tenet, which is empathy. Then I need to have appropriate social skills as they fit into the context of the meeting or situation that we're in. Am I able to bring an appropriate level of self to every conversation that I have? That's something that can absolutely be learned, right? And a
Mhm.
lot of the times we learn that through the bumps and bruises of not showing up in the best way possible. And then the last one is, am I self motivated? There's a lot of research that was done by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and a gentleman by the name of Daniel Pink in a book that he wrote called Drive.
Mm.
And he said for motivation for most people at work is an acronym called MAP. So that is mastery. I feel like I can master the craft, the thing I'm responsible for. I have a path towards getting better and better at this thing. The second thing is autonomy. I have the autonomy to do it in the way that works best for me. That can be as simple as I like having the most brainstorming meetings in the morning, and I like replying to emails in the afternoon. I have the freedom and flexibility to choose my work hours within reason to be able to do the job I need to do. The third thing is purpose. I see the purpose of what I do contributing to something greater, like helping, the organization be successful, helping my team be successful, helping the people that report to me be successful, helping maybe make a change in the world that I think is productive and necessary if maybe I'm in a charitable organization or a social enterprise. But I can see that purpose. So if I have those 5 things, I've got a deep sense of self, I understand who I am, and I understand where my emotions are at in this conversation. Empathy, I'm curious about where you're at and I want to know what matters to you and I understand your perspective. Social skills, I can adapt my social skills as is appropriate for the situation. Self-regulation, I can stop myself from saying the thing I probably shouldn't say, but I can also regulate my emotions so that I show up as my best self. And finally, motivation. I am self motivated. I don't need others to motivate me because I'm living in an environment of mastery, autonomy, and purpose. If I have those things in place, and I can talk later, we can talk more about the practical way of doing these things.
Yeah.
That is an emotionally intelligent leader.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I actually, thanks for that breakdown of it. I feel a
Yes.
model coming on. you
I
know, there's a model in
figured we
my
might go there.
I feel a model coming on.
Yeah.
And it was just interesting listening to you walk through, you know, EQ in terms of these 5. I'm not sure if you said the tests or the tenets, but you were framing them as tests.
Yeah.
am I kind of really self-aware? Am I feeling
Yep.
self-regulated? So
Yep.
self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, social skill, and self-motivated. It would be a fantastic separate podcast to just for parents to say, here are the things you can practically do with your children to install these qualities in them. But then you made this interesting observation about, self-motivation comes from, the Daniel Pink acronym of MAP, and Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's work is just on flow, particularly is just
Yes.
extraordinary. But let's build the bigger framework of this. I mean, we're talking about EQ,
Before we
and
do that,
yes,
I just remembered the name of the book is because you mentioned parents
yes,
and building it in their kids. The best book for building emotionally intelligent children is called The Whole Brain Child.
right.
That book is so practical. It has little cartoon vignettes that show what a conversation would normally look like and what one would look like if you were building an emotionally intelligent child. So I highly recommend that to all parents, and it takes them from birth all the way up to teen years.
Right.
So I'll just share that as a thing. Please continue. Let's build a model.
And for the grandparents that think they might have missed the boat, because does that apply to adult children? You,
Yeah,
you still have a role if you've got grandchildren, right, to
you
play.
do.
So,
Absolutely.
and I guess there's books on emotionally intelligent parenting as well. So,
There are.
there's plenty of this. But you said before, you made interesting a comment that the person that's a domain expert in their particular discipline, and they're
Yeah,
usually really smart, and they get promoted into the leadership role,
they do.
and they kind of get away with it until they get to more senior levels in the organization, and then they might be surrounded by other, emotionally intelligent people, the emotional quotient.
Yes.
But you're talking about someone with a great IQ and ability around what. Let's build the bigger model, because there's EQ and IQ, but what is the bigger? Like, can we build a framework?
Yeah, I think so because there's actually three. So I would say IQ is it's your intelligence quotient. You can do an IQ test online to figure out what your IQ is. It'll move a little bit, but really, as I said earlier, blame your parents. That IQ is something you're pretty much born with.
Yeah.
You've got your EQ, which we've spoken quite a bit about so far and will continue to speak about. And then the one that's come up since really post-pandemic, where leaders were tasked with doing more with less, feeling like there was constant change and feeling that their resilience was being taxed on a regular basis is AQ. And AQ is your adaptability quotient. That is the ability for you to have a fixed, not a fixed mindset, but to have a more flexible mindset and the ability to adapt as reality and the situation around you is changing. One short form of saying that is, you need to have strong beliefs, but they need to be loosely held.
You know, if you get all three of these
Yes.
strongly in place in a leader,
Yeah. Yeah.
what sits at the center of that triangle? So, we know that sometimes people are. Let's try and divide this a little bit. I'm going to push this a bit. You're familiar with
Let's do
models,
it.
right? I'm going
Let's
to
do
push
it.
this a little bit. If we
Okay.
divided each of these sides into two
Yeah.
two kind of key, contextual frames, if you like, and we said
Yeah.
each side's kind of got two big things to think about, or two big things to
Yes.
know, Mike.
Yes.
For
Yep.
example, intelligence quotient, you said something about it doesn't, you're kind of born with it. Um,
There's an accept that goes
yes.
with that. Yeah.
Yep.
And the accept is this, that we have experiences in our lives that help us if we reflect on those experiences. It's not just the things that happen to us that make us wiser. So intelligence is your overall intelligence. Wisdom is the act of taking your experiences and applying self-reflection to them.
Okay, great. So if we, sorry,
Wisdom is a combination of taking your experiences and applying self-reflection.
so if we went like that,
Yeah,
we could
exactly.
we could probably capture the IQ side
Well,
of
I
it.
Yeah, I'd say that most people think that the IQ is increasing as they get older. And that's why I want to differentiate that your wisdom is increasing if you
Yeah.
self-reflect. Effectively, when somebody says that they are getting smarter, they're actually getting wiser, is what's really happening. So it's experiences and reflection is causing them to think their intelligence is going up, but what's happening is they are gaining wisdom.
Yeah. So, if we said the intelligence quotient, IQ, is a function of
Yeah.
experiences and reflection,
Yes.
what would we put on EQ?
I mean, there are five, I said tenets or tests which you can use to determine emotional intelligence. The two foundational ones are like if we were to split it in two, I would say in the brain, self-awareness and empathy actually are in the same area of the brain.
Right.
So I would put the area of awareness, whether it's self or others, I would say awareness is one of them.
Yeah.
And I would say on the other side of that, we want to talk about the self-regulation, social skills, and motivation are how we are showing up in the world. So they're a choice. They are what I would call self-management. So if one thing is if there's the internal awareness of myself and others, I would have awareness on one side and I would have self-management on the
Yeah.
other.
So
That's
I
how I
can,
would split it in two
and
pieces.
I can probably split it into internal, external.
Yeah, I mean, arguably you could say internal because it is for both people, right? It's an
Yeah.
internal thing, awareness and empathy. And then external, your self-management, which is your ability to stay motivated, your although that would almost be internal, but your self-regulation and your social skills are something that would be something other people would witness. So you would call that external.
But also, and I was also thinking in the internal, external,
Yeah.
like all five could easily be both internal and external in the context of, sometimes when someone has an exchange with another person that doesn't go well, the tendency is to blame the external factor, which is the other person, as opposed to
Yeah.
examining the internal factors, which is your own emotional skill, emotional quotient, right? And it's this ability to be in and out of both, actually.
Yeah.
Your own emotional intelligence and impact of that emotional intelligence. I mean, it's an imperfect model because we're not spending a deep time on it. But
No,
what
but
about, go on?
I think, can I just riff off of what you just said there? Because I think most people, we judge ourselves by our intent
Yeah.
and we judge others by their actions.
Oh, what a, say that again, too.
We judge ourselves by our intent, but we judge others by their actions.
Interesting.
So
Could,
instead of me, I would think, well, I made a mistake or I hurt that person's feelings, but I didn't intend to. But if somebody else made a mistake or hurt our feelings, we would judge them by the action. And
so,
what deep empathy provides us the ability to do is to understand that, well, hey, what if I judge that other person by their intent? What if I even asked them what their intent was?
yeah.
Right. So that's a very powerful distinction when you're a leader is if I'm judging myself by my intent, but I judge the other people I lead or other leaders by their actions without exploring with empathy what their intent is, then I'm not really playing fair because I'm not using the same judgment. We're judgment making machines. That's how we function in life, but I'm not using the same scorecard for both of us.
Well, then I've got a few things that could occur on this side. I won't resolve
Yeah.
this. It could be intent and observation. It could be internal and external, and it could
Yeah.
also be intent and judgment.
Yes.
There's a few things I'll leave you to play with and think about outside of this. But
Yeah. These are great.
the emotional quotient are these types of things.
Yeah.
So AQ is this adaptability quotient. What would we break
Yes.
that into?
Well, I think there's two parts. So one, it is awareness of not awareness of change. Let me just riff with you and let's see if we can narrow this
Yeah.
down. So one part of it is resilience. So our ability to manage ourselves through a changing world and to accept that reality will be constantly changing. Because most people don't mind change.
Hmm.
They just don't want to be changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in other words, if I can impact the change, I'm fine with it. But if I feel like I'm being changed externally, well, that bothers me.
Yeah.
And so with resilience in place, it is, can I maintain my stress levels? Can I maintain my nervous system? Can I maintain a calm presence of mind
Mm,
while the world around me feels chaotic? So
mm,
that's really what resilience is. I think on the flip side of that, it is the ability to live in complexity and constant change. I'm
mm,
not sure how I would narrow that down. Sometimes it's called VUCA, VUCA, and so
mm,
that is a uh, the concept of VACU is that's actually an acronym, and it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity.
mm.
Can I live in an environment of vacuum but still maintain on the flip side resilience through that? And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that really has taxed leaders and has led them to experiencing burnout, to experiencing elevated levels of stress. Um, and so it's VUCA. Did I call it vacuum? It's
Yeah.
VUCA.
Yeah.
Why I said vacuum is VUCA. So it's volatility, uncertainty, complexity,
Yeah.
and ambiguity.
Yeah. And if we that makes sense. The adaptability quotient is the ability to operate inside VOCA with resilience and calm, basically.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that is a core leadership skill. And as you could think about that, well, if I have to be resilient, wouldn't that tap my emotional intelligence? Absolutely. Like this is where these things all fit together. My intelligence. Well, if I reflected upon my experiences, then I would become wiser over time. And all of a sudden, this model becomes like this beautiful thought process around what it really means to be a leader today.
Yeah. And so, if we think about leadership as a triangle, it's three things. It's IQ, which is about, having experiences, reflecting on them, and growing wisdom over time, becoming smarter over time. It's about EQ, it's the ability to be clear
Yeah.
about and act with your own intent, but also recognize that you're
Yeah.
making judgments externally, taking observations
Yeah.
externally that may or may not be accurate. And
Absolutely.
so explore for the intent of others and be
Yeah.
and have the self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, social skill, and self-motivation to do that in an effective way. And it's AQ, adaptability, the capacity to operate inside a volatile, uncertain, complex, and what was the A?
And ambiguous.
And yeah, and an ambiguous environment with resilience and calm. And
Yes.
if someone brings all three of those things to the table inside an organization or a
That's a
country,
very, yeah, that's a
everyone will
powerful
go,
leader.
they're a great leader.
Yeah.
How
And
could
and
they
see,
not?
what you've noticed in this, if you're listening to this as a listener right now, where is subject matter expertise in this
Yeah,
conversation? Like we
yeah,
haven't even brought it up because I think that that's a subject matter expertise is a table stake. Like
yeah,
obviously you need to be able to understand the craft of what it is you've chosen to do, whatever that is. But when that's not going to make you a great leader. Subject matter expertise will not make you a great leader.
yeah.
It's a table stake. You have to have it. But the rest of what we've described in this model is what is actually going to make you a great leader, irrespective of what your subject matter expertise is.
That's absolutely true. There's an extension of the model. Um, there's some other things I want to ask you about, so I
Yeah, of
won't push it,
course.
but I know that if I leave it with you, Mike, you'll go away and think about it.
Yeah,
And that is what happens through the combination of IQ and EQ?
right.
What happens through the combination of EQ and AQ? What happens through the combination of AQ and IQ? If a high IQ, high AQ leader
Yeah,
brought those two skills to the table, what does that create?
yeah, yeah,
Not necessarily the EQ. If a leader with high IQ and EQ brought that to the table, but they didn't have great AQ, what does that create? And then the same
yes,
for the bottom corner. All of a sudden,
yeah,
you've got a framework that I know that you'll take to a much deeper level. But if people in leadership roles, not management roles, but leadership roles, because we manage things, we lead people. And so if the subject matter expertise
yeah,
is really about the thing,
yeah,
leadership is about the people.
Absolutely.
And so, dare I venture into what you think the state of leadership is like in the world today?
Oh man.
Should I? Should I
Well,
ask that question?
I think in the political sphere, something dark happened where all of a sudden, duplicity and lying, I think sometimes it was referred to as an alternative set of facts, or no, it's just flat out lying, became okay. And there's this narrative, I think, from leaders that if you're charismatic and you can speak to a base, then you can get away with virtually almost anything at this stage. Like it's shocking to me. The challenge is that um, what's good for the village is best for the individual. But I think what's happened with some leaders is they've decided what's good for me as an individual will be good for the village. And that is never true. This is a principle from Stoicism that Marcus Aurelius figured out like thousands and thousands of years ago. That if you do things, if everyone did this, how would society be? Well, if everyone lied and wasn't trustworthy, that would society would devolve. We are a collaborative human race. And if you
Mm,
go back far enough, if we didn't collaborate, we were dead. If we got ostracized by the community, that was the end of our life. Less so today.
yeah.
So I think, unfortunately, I've seen that happen. I think that there has been in the business context, I think there has been a drive for results over people. And my dear friend Dan Ponifrac has this wonderful phrase, which is, "We are human beings, not human doings."
Mm, mm.
And when leaders forget that, culture devolves in organizations and people get frustrated, they get burnt out, they lose the love of the craft within the business because they are treated as human beings,
Can I
not
just,
human, sorry, they're treated as human doings, not human
yeah,
beings.
can I just love that framing that when people are treated as human doings, not human beings, they lose the love of the craft
Yeah.
at the center of the business. As you well know, a big chunk of what I do is about codifying the core genius of a company.
Yeah.
Genius is not the subject matter of your technical systems and your tech stack. It's the
Yeah.
subject matter of someone who founded a great idea and then had
Yes.
it built upon by many other people.
Yeah.
And so it had an origin and then it had a build. And it solves a problem that people have in a unique way. And it is the craft of the company. The genius is the craft of the company. I love that framing. When people are treated as human doings, they lose their love for the craft. How
Yeah.
many companies do we have? With all the focus on culture, we're not putting the focus on the craft.
Yeah.
But if you built culture and also the love of the craft of the company, imagine what that would do at the not just the top line but the bottom line, of company performance. It would be extraordinary. So I just what are you and we it's easy for us to talk about politicians because we all get to elect them, so we think we all have a say.
Sure.
And I've done a lot of work inside the public sector, as you have.
Yeah.
And most people have very little awareness and understanding of just how many forces at play there are,
Right.
trying to pull in opposite directions that government agencies things are trying to deal with. Right? It's
Absolutely.
very complex work. Um,
Absolutely.
but we do also need to look at company leadership. It's also become okay in companies today sometimes to just not say anything, which is an untruth by omission, or just
Yeah.
to make stuff up. The data breaches we've been experiencing worldwide is a
Yeah.
good example of that.
Yeah.
Major data breaches, we're just not going to tell anyone, you know?
Yeah. For
Um,
months.
yeah, for months. And then, oh, we did have a data breach,
Oops.
that was good for the individual, not good for the village. So
Yeah.
and then of course, there's leadership in all sorts of other levels of society. So what is a leader? Where does a leader start? who's listening to this and they're going, this actually really resonates for me, but
For
I
sure.
feel like I've been, I feel like I've been a pretty high IQ leader.
Yeah.
Actually, I feel like I'm doing pretty well with AQ, but now that we've looked at this model, I perhaps could, you know, maybe I'm not as resilient, as calm as others need me to be. Um, but I want to do more on EQ. I really want to get.
Yeah.
I want to do those two sides of the triangle, but particularly EQ.
Hmm.
Where would they start apart from
Hmm.
Virtus, right? Like
Yeah. No, I think it's,
imagine you're working with somebody and you're going, "Hey,
yeah.
here's where we're going to start."
I think the very best place you can start is with your self-awareness. So, and self-awareness is really kind of checking in to say, like, how am I doing? Like, how was today? Where are my emotions at right now? The more fluent you become in emotional language. So, fluency in emotional language is mad, sad, happy, glad. If you're a toddler, that's probably all the words you need. But if you're an adult, there's more words. So,
Yeah,
you might use words like frustration, consternation, disappointment. There's a wonderful, if you just look on the internet and type in the wheel of emotions, there's this
yeah,
wonderful wheel that shows you the levels, different levels of emotions. The more words you have for emotions, the more you can actually be self-aware. It's like the easiest starting point. So instead of saying the word mad, you're like, actually, I'm frustrated, I'm sad, and I'm disappointed.
mm,
Well, that's much more accurate than mad or say angry. And
mm,
so now it's like, oh yeah, I am frustrated. I yeah, okay, I do feel sad about this. It just grounds you in a much different place. If if I'm unable to have understand my own emotional complexity as an individual by having the words that go with it, how am I supposed to understand what's going on and empathize with someone else?
mm,
I don't even know what's going on with me. And it's the same area of the brain. So when you get good at having an awareness of self, you're actually training yourself how to have an awareness of others. The other thing you can do from an empathy perspective is ask, like, how are you? And and some people say, I'm doing fine. No, like, how are you really doing? Most people will give you a much more complex answer than the
mm,
first answer, the kind of like normal, polite thing they'll tell you. And when you listen to somebody, reflect back what you thought you heard them say. I'll give you a little trick that Black Swan, the gentleman who wrote the book Never Split the Difference,
yeah,
who is a negotiation expert. He was the head of the FBI hostage negotiation
yeah,
team. He said, if you really want people to think you're deeply listening and empathizing with them, repeat the last three words they said.
yeah.
Just do that. And you have to listen pretty intently to pull this off. So the trick is actually not that you're just trying to wait for the last three words, is you never know when the last three words are coming.
Mm,
So to do that, you have to be listening to every word. And if you can repeat the last three words in the response that you give to someone, and then you can ask them, well, how does that make you feel? And they tell you, I'm like, oh, so you're frustrated and angry and you're feeling sad about that. And they're like, yeah, I am. Right away they're like, wow, you really heard me. You repeated the last three words of what they said, and then you got the emotional context. Now you know why it's important to them. If you have that conversation, imagine how that changes any interaction that you're having. So one of the tricks we do at Virtus is that every single meeting, we don't let the meeting get started. How was your weekend? And then somebody will reply, oh, it was great. Well, what made it great? Oh, well, I got to spend time at my daughter's soccer game. Oh, okay. Like, how'd they do? Oh, they actually won or they lost. Like, oh, like, how was your daughter happy with the outcome? Yeah, it was awesome. Okay. What else did you do this weekend? And they're like, oh, I went to a movie with my wife on Sunday. Oh, that's cool. What'd you see? I saw the new Tron movie. Oh, I haven't seen it. Was it worth seeing? Like, I'm thinking about taking my daughter. And they're like, yeah, it was awesome, actually. Now, one conversation that most of us, how was your weekend? It was great.
yeah,
Think about the level of connection by my curiosity of just asking the next most obvious question that I could ask that person. Now I know the context that they're coming into the meeting that I'm having with them, but I've also humanized this. We're just two human beings about to talk about business stuff. My record so far with my good friend Christine Messen, we were doing a deal and we needed to get the deal finalized and we had an hour to talk about it. And it was a pretty complex deal. It was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And at the 55-minute mark, she said to me, oh, I've got a meeting in 5 minutes. We have to finish this deal. And we finished a $330,000 deal in 5 minutes.
Mm.
We spent the first 55 minutes talking about our lives together. But the level of trust and empathy that we built together was so great that what was supposed to take us an hour to hammer out, we hammered out in 5 minutes.
Yeah,
And I just
it's
send the paperwork over.
fascinating. And, you know, if you think about typical business meetings,
Yeah.
people will come into the room and someone say, you know, how was the weekend? Yeah, it was good, but listen, let's get down to business.
Yeah.
And the people are the business, right?
Right. That's
And
it.
the second kind of question, what's the state of leadership in the world today? Um, then also goes to, the rise of AI and
Yeah.
this concern that a lot of people have that we're dehumanizing the collective. I used to talk years ago about, we were dehumanizing the corporation, but I think we are dehumanizing the collective in many ways now. We're removing humanity from the
Yes.
collective. I just saw a story about a TV news story in the UK on AI, and the reporter's walking down the street and speaking to camera and everything else. And at the end, the reporter says, "Actually, I'm AI. I'm not
Yeah.
real," and you couldn't tell. And I felt, I felt a little bit gypped, a little bit ripped off
Yeah.
by the story.
Yeah.
So in an AI-driven world, because it is enormously productive, it's enormously useful. AI as a tool, as a technology. I don't just mean chat. I mean in all other, agents
Yeah.
and
All the,
system
yeah.
flow and all that sort of thing. But give me the EQ leadership perspective
Yes.
on AI that I'm sure you've given some thought to already.
Let me cheat.
Go
I'm
on
going to
then.
actually borrow from a friend of ours, Greg Smith, who's the
Okay.
CEO of an LMS company called Thinkific.
Yeah.
And I had him, I've got this podcast that you've been on called the Mike Methods. I had him on the podcast and I was asking about AI. And he said, we're at this intersection and point in time where on one side of the coin, we have AI, which is a dehumanizing type experience. It is not connection. The other side is that people are going to crave human connection. And both of those two things need to happen at the same time. If we lean too far into connection, then we're going to miss this value of this AI. But if we lean too far into AI, then we're going to miss the fact that we as human beings are wired for connection.
Mm,
And so any opportunity where we can blend those two things together is a good opportunity. I think people are worried about AI replacing their jobs. I would worry more about somebody who's AI enabled replacing your job. So
yeah.
a peer who's very good at using AI tools to become more efficient and effective in their role, and they happen to have a high EQ. So imagine they've got a high EQ, they're intelligent, they've got adaptability quotient, and they're functional at AI. That's somebody who's scary. That person will take your job in a heartbeat because they'll do
Yeah.
something you can't possibly keep up with them. So, and I think for people that are saying, well, I don't really see how AI applies to my business or my job right now, you will never until somebody else takes your job or a competitor is using it in a way you never thought of. The
Yeah.
first step is just get a ChatGPT account or any of them, Gemini, it doesn't matter, and start playing with it and
Yeah.
think of one thing every day.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as I'm hungry. Okay, take a picture of your fridge, upload it to ChatGPT, and say, I'm hungry. These are the things in my fridge. Build me a recipe that uses the ingredients in that in the fridge. And like, oh, well, that's a pretty easy. I could do that. That's simple, right?
Yeah.
So anything that you like personally, and what happens is when people start using AI, they start branching into every area, and all of a sudden the personal stuff leaks over into business, and they're like, oh, now I know how to use it with my job.
Yeah.
And as soon as they figure out one way and they share it with a colleague, then that colleague will say, oh, here's how I'm using AI day to day. And it's a functional conversation we just need to be having within every business.
Yeah. I mean, the way that most people get started on a high performance pathway, whether it's sport or the arts or whatever, is that it was something they played at when they were children.
Yeah.
We usually start with play, and a client of mine who I adore, Susan Garrett, is probably the world's number one dog trainer. Has a hierarchy. You can train a dog through punishment, which
Hmm.
is if they don't do the right thing, you punish them. You can train
Hmm.
them through persuasion. Every time
Yep.
they do something, you give them food, or you train them through play. You
Yeah.
make it extraordinarily fun and curious for them. And you get much
Yes.
further if you train through play, right? And
Yes.
we get good at things when we started out with play. And,
Yes.
so for people that are worried about AI, just start playing with it. It's what children do. They just play with it and they discover things, and then play creates curiosity. And if you could, as you said, if someone is playing with AI and they're curious and they've got high EQ and high AQ, they are the ones to watch out for. They're the ones to hire if you're the business leader,
Yes.
and they are the ones to watch out for. So, we can't look at AI as this thing that we have to resist because it's already here.
Yeah.
Katrina Wallace, who I had on a podcast, said it's another species. She's been
Yeah,
heavily in
that's
the
well
AI world
said.
for a long time, so
Yeah.
it's here, right? But play and play with AI and work on your EQ, and your AQ. Interesting. So, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I'd like to wrap up with three quick questions, if I could,
Yeah, let's do it.
and just get your responses so people can know a bit more about Mike.
Of
Um,
course.
one of the questions I often ask is, what did you want to be when you're a child? I'm sure it wouldn't have been leadership, but let's do some more interesting ones. If you could, a lot of what you've been talking about, and you're fascinated with development and growth and things like that.
Yes.
So, if
Yep.
there was any skill that you could master and it required zero practice, I click my fingers and you've got it, what would that skill be?
I think it would be the ability to build trust as fast as possible.
Yeah, that'd be a skill. That would be a skill. It would drive everything. But you actually
It,
did.
it would, yeah, I think it would drive relationship. It would drive friendship. It would drive working relationships. It would drive any deal that you needed to get done. It would drive the ability to influence and persuade people in a positive way. So I think that ability is, yeah, I would love to have that.
Mm. So if we frame that, the ability to build trust worth trusting in 30 seconds or less, there's a book title there.
Yeah.
Is there a failure or setback on this journey that's taught you disproportionately more than other kind of setbacks you might have experienced?
I mean, it's been 25 years that I can't even keep track of all the things I've failed at in that time. Um, I would say hire A players for every role.
Right. Yeah.
I would say that the failure that I've had is that I have allowed people to stay in their roles that are B and C players too long in the hopes that through coaching and development or performance management they might be able to become an A player. I think you have to hire A players. If You can probably take a B player and make them an A player, but you can take an A player and make them a superstar, and it doesn't take very much effort. Like the
What?
coaching and development that's required is so much less.
So, in the context of everything we've been talking about today,
Yeah.
what is an A player? Is it someone that has the domain expertise, IQ, or are you hiring for IQ, EQ, and AQ?
I think you can, if you can teach subject matter, but it's really hard to develop emotional intelligence, adaptability quotient, adaptability intelligence, and IQ. You can't. So you right, like I think that if you bring in a person, I look at it like this: if you have an emotionally intelligent, adaptive leader who is intelligent and who's a great collaborator. You can kind of teach them to do anything. If they happen to also have subject matter expertise, oh my, look out. Like
Yeah.
they are going to rule the world in your space. And I would rather have somebody like that come in. Steve Jobs has this wonderful quote. And for all his failures as a leader, like, he was pretty harsh as a leader, but he created an amazing company. So one of his quotes was, you don't hire smart people to tell them what to do.
Yeah.
You hire smart people so they'll tell you what to do.
Yeah. That's interesting. Very interesting. Last question. Is there a mystery in the world today you'd love to solve?
How did the US end up in the position that it's in right now?
It's probably
How
a good.
politically did the US end up in the position they're in because it's starting to feel like the end of an empire? And I'm super curious to understand. Now, I know people may very much disagree with me, but when I look at it from a leadership perspective and the way that leadership is being touted right now, and I'm not picking on any particular party, but I am very curious to know how did we end up in the place where there's such polarity, that there is such discord, uh, and there seems to be factions created in a common community that has been thriving and was really showing the world what democracy and what society could become. And I feel like they've slipped off that path.
And I would, I would add to that, they don't get to own that by themselves either. We can look across a whole range of other countries around the world
Absolutely.
that have had this fragmentation occurring
Yeah.
that, I don't know, might have been there, but it's bubbled to the surface, or actually it has occurred for a whole variety of reasons. I mean, how do we create greater, collaboration, connection, and cohesion than separation? Is the mystery we're all wrestling with, because it isn't just the US, it's lots of countries around the world with this fragmentation. And so that's a great place for us to finish.
I think if I was to frame it, I'm concerned that the me has overtaken the we.
Okay, perfect.
And I think that if we focus more on what was right for the village and the community, that it would work out for everyone in a much better way, and you wouldn't have to worry about me.
It's a great place to end, Mike. Thank you so much for sharing this time with us.
Of course, thanks for your time.
And building a model around this
fun.
for us. And, it's been fun. So thank you so very much.
Thanks, Simon.